Kubernetes 1.30 is out, GitLab is under attack, and Marriott is lying to you.
He's Mike. I'm Steve. Welcome to Wired In.
Yes, Wired In, where we break down 10 articles, 10 breakdowns, all the wildest news in the tech world.
And all of the articles are described below, so ring the bell, subscribe if you want to be notified when we go live. So, shall we get into it?
Let's get into it. First up on the docket, we have, although this is not working, there we go. Kubernetes 1.30 is out. That's right, our headline news story. Kubernetes Kubernetes is the release name. And I feel like the story is more about the name than it is about the features that got released. For those of you who aren't into the, internet/meme culture, I had to look this up. And so I went to Wikipedia. Uwu is known to exist back as far as 2005 in anime fan fiction. The origin of the word is not known, with many people believing it to originate in internet chat rooms. And by 2014, the emoticon had spread across the internet into Tumblr, becoming an internet subculture.
And
the emoticon has been popular in furry fandom.
Right. But yeah, not everybody likes it, right?
It may mean cuteness as well as curiosity and confusion. It also has the effect of annoying its receiver. So yeah. That's what Steve was waiting for. Very interesting choice of words. Kat Cosgrove had a funny take on Twitter if you want to go check that out. But yeah, it's just the typical standard release. I wasn't expecting anything crazy. I didn't see any massive security updates. There was a few there's 45 enhancements, 17 graduated to stable, 18 entering beta, and 10 graduated to alpha. The job success / completion policy I found was really interesting because there's always issues with Kubernetes jobs about when they said that they were going to succeed. And so there's more standards about how you can say, you need this many completions in order to be a successful job.
I see.
So I want to look into that. That was pretty cool. Another one was the load balancer service IP. So Kubernetes is now more aware of the load balancing services when they come up, how to send traffic, etc. So, yeah. Did you see anything that caught your eye?
Just the emission control language is now stable, and I think I got to dive into that because now that it kind of might be surpassing, like it might be actually sort of competing with admission controllers like Gatekeeper and Kyberno, right? Because it's been no one's diving into it because if it's not stable, you're not like, why are you spending the time, right? But it's interesting, and I don't really know how it works yet. So I think now's the time for me to, get my thinking cap on and explore how it works.
Yeah, you have to check out Steve on Tool Time, diving into it.
Yeah,
in the future. Yeah, literally just as we got off the show 2 weeks ago, this one came up. CISA, DHS, and OpenSSF announced the open source project Protobomb.
Yeah, I went through this. I have mixed feelings about software bill of materials generally because they're good, but they're difficult. And it's like, how deep do you go? Do you get things like Vex involved? But Protobomb is just an exchange program in a way, because we've got Cyclone DX, you've got SPDX or SPDX, or however you want to say that. And it enables the ability to exchange software bill of materials in a uniform format. But it's using this technology called Protobomb because it's using this protobuf format for serializing structured data, right? But Protobuf was originally designed for much smaller structured data entities like super fast JSON. So I'm actually quite curious because how big, like SBOMs can be massive. They're not tiny. I mean, but I know they compress really well. I don't know. I'm curious. It's a good idea, but I'm curious how well it works in practice. So, but I mean, look how many people are behind it, right? Like Homeland Security,
yeah, it feels like the government sponsoring this because they see all the private companies coming out with all their different versions of what an SBOM should look like. And they want something that is a little bit more consolidated across the platforms, right? We have a couple CISA articles that demonstrate this. The government's getting a lot more involved in the cybersecurity space.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that. All right. Yeah, speaking of, And we have more than 800 vulnerabilities resolved through CISA ransomware notification pilot program. Last year, we actually talked about this. The United States government launched a program where they are going to incentivize hackers and people around the world to go and find issues in companies and notify them. And so they found, I believe it was like 1,700, and they notified, let me see, it was related to Joe Biden passing in 2022.
Yeah.
Task force co-led by CISA and the FBI. And most of the notifications were in the government and healthcare sector. So I feel like
It's a pretty good initiative, I think. It's I was trying to figure out what was the implementation of it.
yeah, it was
is it
tight-lipped
like
when it first came out last year, when it first got launched.
I just think it's a really interesting way of getting the government involved to tell you how you're doing things badly. It also is beneficial to CISA as well to have that kind of knowledge. So that's pretty cool.
This is probably on the back of some of the attacks that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 years, a lot of exposed assets and all that stuff. So the government's like, okay, we need a counter to this. These foreign adversaries coming in and trying to hack our hospitals and things of that sort. So
yeah, well, yeah, the NHS certainly knows about that one.
Oh yeah.
All right. This is CISA's featuring pretty prominently in this particular episode. This is just hot off the presses, May 2nd. CISA warns of active exploitation of severe GitLab password reset vulnerability. If you use two-factor authentication, don't worry, they can reset your password, but they can't get your multi-factor authentication details. So they can't take over your account. However, it is tracked as CVE 2023-7028 with a CVSS score of 10. That's pretty bad. But they haven't, obviously for obvious reasons, they haven't said how the exploitation issue can be exploited. They're not getting into this, which is good. Thank you for doing that. But it does just, oh, go ahead. What?
I was going to say there's mitigating factors. If you have two-factor authentication, this isn't an issue. Basically, somebody's getting in, sending a password reset email. You got to think if you have a GitLab instance that is set up, right?
You would hope. But let's wait till we get to our last article, and maybe we'll see that
that's a good point.
People aren't as smart as we think they are. But yes, it was in GitLab versions 16.5.2 up to around 16.7.2, and then backported with patches. I love how you backport a patch and you introduce a vulnerability. Amazing. We've all been there. Yeah, 16.1.16. And go check out the article. It's down below, and you'll find out whether you are susceptible to having your password reset, which means you can't. It's kind of weird. Like you get locked out, but they can't take over. So you just get stuck, and then you have to reset your password again.
Yeah, they were worried about somebody using access to the GitLab account to then push packages or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Code. That was the biggest impact. That's why I got rated a 10. I think the impact was pretty large if they got access.
Well, if you don't have two-factor authentication, basically they own you.
Yeah.
It's bad.
No kidding. All right, the last one in our general news is kind of a crazy one. This one came across my desk, and I was like, the EU is doing what? So this is in relation to child sexual abuse material. And the European Union is trying to pass a law that they want the tech companies basically to spy on messaging apps, and they want to do it on the client side. So let's say you have WhatsApp or iMessage or anything like that. They want that application to have the ability to scan your messages for child sexual abuse content. Now, as you go through this article, there's a ton of experts that are weighing in and saying, this is a terrible idea. The whole point of encryption is that you can't break it. If you can selectively break encryption, it's not encrypted, right? That's not how encryption works. The second thing is by introducing a client-side mechanism for scanning, you also are introducing another security risk because you're going to be collecting and sending information. There's also the aspect of false positives. You're putting, this scanning material onto a bunch of phones, millions, maybe billions of users that are all getting sent back to a database, and you have no clue what's going to happen with that information. Maybe it goes through an AI. Maybe you have hallucinations, and somebody's life is ruined because you put the scanning device on there. So it seems like the EU is going to plow on with this. They don't seem to be wanting to stop pushing this through. So I have a feeling that regardless of how it gets implemented, it will get implemented in some way. Steve, what do you think? I mean, you're closer to this than I am.
Oh gosh, it's just another example of I want this, but I don't know how to do it. So I'm just going to like suggest that this is the way we should do it. It's not going to get implemented. Like you can push all you want. It's how can you possibly make this happen? But I like the sentiment. It's just there's no practicality around it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a good article I'll bring up in 2 weeks on our next show on Friday that had to do with the EU and AI and hallucinations. And basically, the EU does not want hallucinations around specific figures, public figures, and people because they want to cut down on misinformation. However, hallucinations are somewhat of a feature, not a bug of AI. It's not something you can really get rid of without actually going into the AI and saying, you cannot talk about this person at all. There is going to be misinformation. There is going to be slight issues with it. So yeah, come back in 2 weeks and I'll have a good breakdown for you. Until then, we're into the crazy stuff.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. Microsoft, years of security debt come crashing down. An article by David Jones published on the 30th of April. Critics, like David Jones perhaps, say negligence, misguided investments, and hubris, love that word, have left the enterprise shining on its back foot. But I would like, we can jump straight on this, right? We almost make fun of Microsoft every time we talk because it's hard not to have them on the show because things seem to go wrong with such regularity. Here they're citing the could have been mitigated, poorly reacted to Microsoft Exchange hack last year. They're talking about how in Microsoft, the threat-backed Russian Midnight Blizzard gained access to emails, credentials, all sorts of different things. And then just this April, and just before we restarted the show, this is one of those frustrating things. There was the Cyber Safety Review Board releasing an anticipated report saying that the CISA, again, CISA is in every single article, issuing an emergency directive, ordering civilian agencies to mitigate vulnerabilities in their networks, analyzing the stolen content of emails, credentials, and there's a whole article about it on the same site here, caught sharing credentials with Microsoft over email, like that, just barely missed the show. Yeah. I guess, and this is a long article. Like this isn't just like a cursory look. Mm-hmm. There's almost too much to discuss, talking about failure of accountability, et cetera. Like it really gets into it.
Yeah, there was an interesting point that I think the author really nailed, which is Microsoft sees cybersecurity as an investment, as a way to make revenue on their Azure service instead of a net neutral investment or something that loses them money based on getting more customers. And it's also putting these nation states in a very difficult place where they can't necessarily move off of Azure super easy without a massive financial cost. But then Microsoft itself is not actually spending the money to protect its own assets. And so when it comes to nation states, they're in a catch-22. In Azure, I think they have 20-25% of the global market. A lot of government money is part of that market. So let's just say it's a tough place to be in. It
is interesting. If you go all the way to the bottom of the article, if you just want a curious finish to it, it's talking about how security is Microsoft's number one priority, et cetera, and somehow pivots into a little sales pitch for their new security Copilot, which launched early in April. I'm like, wait, how did you just do that?
Yeah, here are all our problems. Buy this new thing. We're trying to fix it.
Yeah, wait, what?
Oh, that's too good. All right. From one behemoth to another, we're on to VMware. Broadcom tells partner negotiating for a charity. VMware is not for everybody. This had to do with the Children's Hospital that purchased VMware products. They went to the negotiation when they said, listen, we're a nonprofit. We can't just like increase our margins that much. We have set budgets. Like, can you work with us? They said VMware is not for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like it's every week, every other week, there's a new story about VMware and this negotiation, product cuts. I don't know how much of it is true. Don't know if this is Broadcom getting the IBM treatment of the past, right? Where when they bought Red Hat was going to change significantly. And some articles were true, some articles weren't. But Let's just say they're going after their big spenders. They don't necessarily seem to want to make profit or enable those medium to small size businesses right now.
Yeah, it's not the first time something like this has happened with an acquisition, but it's just funny that they're so flippant about it.
Yeah, doesn't the bad press doesn't seem to bother them at all.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, okay. I mean, to each their own. All right. I threw this one in here because I thought it was great. I like the subtitle, "A Teenager's Hands Are the Devil's Playthings." It's a personal, it's a personal recount about how working in the information security and cybersecurity, you tend to try to break things. You develop what should be malicious proof of concepts, and when they cite the Morris firm of 1998, I like, a researcher kind of accidentally / intentionally created a massive worm and got in a little bit of trouble. Just how do you find out if your proof of concept works in a controlled environment? How does it slip out of the cage, kind of thing? And he's going into, and the reason I want this article in here is because I like LD preload. It says, if you're unfamiliar with, if you read no other paragraph in here, read the paragraph here in the center that says, if you're unfamiliar with LD preload, yes, it is a fabulous debugging mechanism on Unix systems. If you create an environment variable, LD preload, you say equals your thing, then every time a dynamically linked function call or package is executed, just to make sure everything is smaller, like the example they use here is like fopen. You're just going to open a file. You shouldn't have to build an fopen file into your compiled executable because it's already there, right? So let's just dynamically link it, share the code, make everything smaller and happier. Unless preload is existing, in which case it asks the preload program, do you want me to do this? And do you want me to run this one? And you can override everything. So you can already see, like, there's some code examples in the article. Go check it out about how you can, just use your imagination. It's creating a worm with LD preload is easy. What's interesting about LD preload is, unbeknownst to many people, actually it's used for security all the time. You can use it instead of agents. You can put it inside containers. You can set LD preloads and do all sorts of wonderful positive things in addition to debugging. But it's an incredibly weirdly dangerous mechanism that exists within Unix. And I'm not at all surprised that this is a little bit of a teenager tale about how you could see, I could see Foster's mind already thinking, I wonder what I could do with that. And this is exactly the story.
Does it still exist? Are packages still like that in Unix?
Yeah. It's still totally possible to do with this, what he did, and intercept, run things in advance, and even defer back to the original package. So it's a huge man-in-the-middle attack. Yeah. Your evil mind is on now.
Oh yeah. All right. On to, Marriott lying. This was a pretty big story. It's a subtle lie. I'm just more curious about what happens based off this lie. Marriott admits it falsely claimed for 5 years it was using encryption during 2018 breach. Now, it was using encryption. I think this is a little bit of a gotcha title. They're using the SHA-1 algorithm, which I believe was known to be insecure in 2011. I want to say there was evidence for it breaking. And then they had the first rumors of a hack in 2017. Then this hack happened in 2018. They didn't upgrade their encryption to any of the newer standards. But when they were, I guess, going to court, going to trial, they said they were using AES 1.28, I believe. If you go to look further down the article, it says...
It says up here, but yeah.
Yeah. And so they lied and they said they were using that. And it wasn't until basically CrowdStrike and a couple other companies came in, did an investigation, and found that the databases were not encrypted with that. And I got to think, like, is there a standard for something like that where if you go into a trial, I guess if the defense doesn't produce that sort of information, that it's not lying, it's on the prosecution doesn't present that sort of defense, then it's like not Marriott's fault. But if that information comes out after some sort of trial or civil suit, you would think that it would reopen the case, right? Because the entire argument goes out the window.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know. This is are we in uncharted waters a little bit here, right?
Yeah, and it's just because you can only do so much research before something like this. So if you'd see the title that you just scroll by, lawyers for the plaintiff say the misidentification thwarted fraud finding efforts, right? Because it's really hard to go and prosecute a CTO and say that they're doing the right thing and all this stuff when they say, okay, we had encryption, we had all this stuff, somebody just left the door open. That's not really our fault. But when there's multiple layers of security that are supposed to be there and you lie about one of them, that seems like a pretty obvious, I feel like you should be going on trial for something like that.
I agree. Let's see what happens.
Okay, we'll go with that. All right, on to the last one, the final story, the 10th story. This one's in the UK.
Way.
So I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, we're stupid. That's the answer there. Admin. I mean, remember, I alluded to the last article, right? We're saying surely everybody has multi-factor authentication for their GitLab. Of course they do. Or their passwords admin or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the UK has, well, how do you even do this? Is another one of those, great idea, but how do you ban bad passwords?
You can just build it into the code, right? And just basically say you can't have this password. I mean, I always get rejected for having too many like symbols and letters. So I feel like you can just do that. And they'll go after the companies, right?
I wonder if that's the idea. Like they're coming into, this is how the UK government spends its valuable time, by the way, is coming up with great legislation like this, where we're trying to, I mean, where's NordPass? NordPass, the most commonly used password was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and still password. Most systems don't let you even do that. Yeah, as you stated, you have to put symbols in, so much so that you commonly forget your own password if you're not using a password manager. But I think the idea will be that if some reason you get breached or something bad happens to you and it maybe falls into GDPR and it becomes discovered that you used the stupidest password ever, that's the idea, I think, here. That's the method of enforcement, is if it goes all wrong and we can tell that you did this, then you're in hotter water than you would have been normally. And throw it back up for 2 seconds, just so we can see the UK's
Arsenal.
Yeah, football team.
That's what I found funny when I was reading through this.
You can't like credential stuff like this in the UK. It's all like football teams and then easy stuff. So yeah.
I don't see why having a password standard for applications and websites is that hard. You could just say, hey, listen, in 3 years, you can't allow these passwords. You have to allow a certain amount of difficulty. I mean, every single major tech company has that as a standard now. Or, I mean, even if I try to set up like RHEL and I have a basic password, it warns me. It says, this is a terrible password. You might want to switch this. So I don't see why it's that hard to implement. Yeah, it's always the enforcement mechanism that's going to be the hardest, right?
Precisely. Well, okay. On that bombshell, this has been 10 articles, 10 breakdowns of some of the wildest things in the cloud native world.
Yeah. He's Steve. I'm Mike. We'll see you back in 2 weeks for another breakdown. Have a good weekend.